opportunity to students to balance academics here at LI while they trained with one of the most advanced cross-country ski programs in the U.S. They used Brook Mountain and they used the Linden Audi Club for training. The members were excused at 2 o'clock every day to go train, and with the change of daylight savings time, they actually released at 1 o'clock sometimes to go ski. They competed in junior nationals. Some went on to join the U.S. Olympic team in 1977. Do you remember that here, Mrs. Perry? Yeah. The Linden Outing Club, along with the training center, co-hosted the U.S. National Cross Country Championships right here in Randolph. Interesting enough, I found a picture from 1975 when the Linden Nordic Training Center went for a world record skiathon. In 24 hours, they completed 242 miles. We got a lot to do tomorrow night. Hold it. Their goal was about 250 miles, so they were about 10 miles short of the goal. Whether or not they got the world record, I don't know. I believe this is where the skiathon originated. However, Mr. Scaler just informed me that he remembers, what year was that? 1998. In 1998, Mr. Dwyer and yourself, coaching at the time, actually started the all-night skiathon in ESPN Park. So do come out before your own team members tomorrow as they take shifts continuously skiing around the track until Saturday morning. And remember all these facts. It'll be very important at a later date.
Coming to LI from an environment like that was hard. I think I was probably a cocky kid or a bratty kid, but I wasn't really a confident one. I struggled academically in a lot of subjects, in particular math. I flunked math. I flunked Latin. I flunked Spanish twice. I hated being told what to do, probably because I thought I would be lousy at it if I really tried. To be honest, when I was here, I felt completely powerless. But despite these failures, there were teachers here at LI that didn't give up on me. One was my English teacher, Jerry Stork. Jerry was always giving me books, not just the ones for his class, but ones like On the Road by Jack Kerouac, or Sometimes a Great Notion by Ken Kesey. He lived next door to my grandmother here in town, across the street from the old Cumberland Farms, actually on the site of the new Cumberland Farms. But I was visiting one day in his driveway, and he asked me if I liked his truck. It was this beat-up old Chevy Love, which was a really beat-up old Chevy Love. I'm like, yeah, I don't have a truck, so I guess this one's cool. And he made a deal with me on the spot that if I maintained a B average for a semester, he would give me the truck. Now, I didn't get B's for the next semester, and I didn't get the truck. But that's not the point. The point is, Jerry really cared. And I mean, that was crazy. I would never do that. Another influence in my time here at LI was the woodshop teacher, Mr. Hilliard. One day he heard that I'd stolen a canoe paddle out of another kid's locker. And he drove up to my house in Sutton after school to get it back. And he didn't yell at me. He didn't give me detention. Instead, he encouraged me to take his class so I could make my own paddle and my own canoe. And I did. And I can tell you that paddling that canoe in the Adirondacks with Paul Hilliard was the best thing I ever did here at LI. So I can't say that when I graduated at LI I was a fully formed human being, ready to earn my place in the universe, but I did have some folks that inspired me and instilled in me more confidence than I had when I came here. The day after I graduated, I moved out of my house in Sutton and took a job on a commercial fishing boat on Cape Cod named The Hunter. The captain was this guy named Ken. He smoked 3 packs of cigarettes a day.
Don't talk.
He wasn't really friendly. He used profanity more creatively than anyone I have ever met. He could use the F word as a noun, a verb, an adjective, an adverb, an occasional gerund. It was amazing. And one day, about a week into the job, I did something wrong, and all the nets on the boat became snarled up in this huge ball. And the tide was running, pulling on the nets that were half in the water. We ran over them with the boat, and they got tangled up in the prop. Stuff was like flying around the deck. So here comes Ken with this amazing vocabulary. I'm floundering around trying to untangle the nets, but really just hoping that somebody else will fix this for me. And this is true. Ken has a knife in his hand. And I don't know if it's for me, or the nets, or what's going on. And he stares at me and grinds his teeth and says, "Don't just look like you're doing something, do something." And that was probably the first, but also the most important lesson I've ever learned at work. Don't just look like you're doing something. Do something. And that's what I've tried to do. I graduated from LI almost 25 years ago, and in that time I have had a lot of jobs. I worked on other gill netting boats in Ocean City, Maryland, and on a shrimp boat up in Maine. I washed dishes all over the place, including a Mexican restaurant in Homer, Alaska, and a coffee shop in New York City. I spent a winter on an island off the coast of Portland, Maine as a self-employed handyman. I worked on farms. I pounded nails for carpenters in Sutton, Newark, Wheelock, Linden. Spent 2.5 years as a Peace Corps volunteer in Paraguay, South America, the hardest and best job I've ever had. I met my wife in a cab in Miami on the way there, and finally learned Spanish, and became fluent in the indigenous language of Paraguay, which is called Guarani. I read books. I worked at a test prep company helping rich kids in New York City get higher scores on their SATs. That was the worst job I've ever had. I got fired. I worked as a student, eventually getting a degree in English from UVM and a master's in the humanities and social thought from NYU. If anybody can tell me what the heck that degree title means, I'd really appreciate it. I spent 2 years as a recruiter in upstate New York trying to convince French-speaking college students to live in West Africa to work on reforestation projects. I worked as a high school English teacher for 6 years here at LI. I worked at the State Arts Council for 3, coordinating the Poetry Out Loud program for Vermont and trying to make changes to education policy. I've worked as a board member at the Vermont Humanities Council, the Vermont Community Development Association, and the Vermont State Employees Credit Union. Most importantly, I continue to work as a father and as a husband. There doesn't seem to be any logical connection between any of these jobs. I can't really call them career choices. In fact, the other day, the guy who hired me for the job that I have now told me that my career path was complete BS. And that said, I think if you ask the people I've worked with, I hope, many of them would describe me as curious and enthusiastic. I love people. I love talking about ideas. I love challenges. The bigger the knot, the better. I love trying to do something, whether it's helping a kid learn the difference between an Italian and a Shakespearean sonnet, or helping a municipally owned electric company borrow $2 million at 0% interest from the federal government so it can lend the money back out at the same rates and terms to a business in an industrial park that will employ Vermonters. For real, that's actually what I'm trying to do this week. I now work at USDA Rural Development. I'm the Associate Director. 5 years ago, I had no idea this federal agency existed. I bet most of you have never heard of it. But basically, it's a giant federal bank. Our mission is to improve the quality of life and economic vitality of rural communities. We do that by making investments in communities in the forms of grants and loans in the areas of housing, business development, and essential community infrastructure. Things like running water, broadband, fire trucks. We make investments that private banks won't, or we back up a local bank so that they can make a loan. Last year, we invested over $300 million in Vermont and New Hampshire. Now, if you live in the Kingdom, you know that life in rural America can be hard. 1 out of 5 kids in this region faces food insecurity. The average median household income in Caledonia County is $20,000 less than in Chittenden County. Last year, life expectancy in rural America actually declined. But you live here anyway, right? I've been around. Everywhere from Cleveland to Kazakhstan, Barton to Brazil, Kenya to Kennebunk. I'm not sure there's a more beautiful place on earth than the Northeast Kingdom. I am not a religious person, but the Bible tells a story of God commanding Moses to the top of a mountain to look out over the Promised Land. That mountain was named Pisgah, and the Promised Land was called Canaan. Think about that the next time you hike Pisgah and stand out on Pulpit Rock and look north. My agency makes investments in rural communities like Canaan or Pownell because we believe in them. We believe that a kid from Sheffield should have the same shot at life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness as her fellow citizen on the Upper East Side of New York City. So what do those investments look like? So if you go down to Rose Lane across the street from the Miss Lindaville Diner, you'll find the Linden Wastewater Treatment Plant. That plant is funded in part by a grant and loan from Rural Development. If you continue down Broad Street, you'll see the new co-working space in the old bag bomb factory. Last year, Rural Development provided about $150,000 in grant funds to help make that happen. If you keep traveling down the street, past the old tap and die plant, you'll see a multifamily housing property that Rural Development is helping to renovate. We helped fund the wood pellet boiler across the street in the math building and the makerspace down on Lower Campus. That's just one town. So what do I actually do? I talk to people. I find out what they want to do. I find out what they think would make their communities more successful. What would give their kids a chance to be whoever or whatever they want to be. And then I go back to my office and try to find a way to help pay for it. Believe it or not, it actually kind of comes back to math. Robert Frost has this great poem called Two Tramps in Mud Time. On one hand, it's about a guy splitting wood, and on another, it's about the obligations we all have to one another in a community. What we do for others, what we do for ourselves. And the poem ends like this. My object in living is to unite my avocation and my vocation as my two eyes make one sight. Only where love and need are one, and the work is play for mortal stakes, is the deed ever really done for heaven and future sakes. An avocation is a hobby. It's something you love to do. A vocation is a job. Maybe if you're lucky, it's a calling. If you can find a way to do both, to do it for others and to do it for yourself, I think you will be happy. I've got one last thing to say. When I was a kid, sitting where you are now, I had no idea what I would do with my life or what I could do with my life. I felt powerless. I hope you know how powerful you are. Think of the power in this room. Think of the power each of you possesses individually and together. Literally, the power to change your community, your state, your life, your world. Do something. Thank you.
1889. That makes it 130 years old. And it was started by a group of 25 alumni. And the very first bylaws of the association stated that the members had to be graduates of Linden Institute. And since then, it has been amended, and the eligibility requirements have changed to you only need to attend Linden Institute for 1 year, be considered part of the alumni or to be an alumnus, and you had to have left on good terms. So, and this also includes anyone who has graduated from the institute. So that's nice. The Alumni Association has over 8,000 members, living members, 8,253 to be exact. And we will actually celebrate our newest members when the class of 2019 graduates in June. There are board members and officers. Our current president is Tim Kirchhoff. He's the class of 1996. And the mission of this association is to help support the school through providing connections with students, friends, and alumni. And our alumni office is a great networking tool for all of you. My job is to keep all of you connected to each other and keep you connected to LI. This is why we have class reunions every 5 years. We plan fun events on campus to get people to come back to our campus. And then, yes, eventually we will be asking you to give back to LI. So I hope you can remember this, that when that ask for your support does come, you remember sitting in these seats that were given to the school by alumni. You remember the track you run on, the gymnasiums you played in, the sugar house you're using to make maple syrup, the new 3D printers. These curtains were all made possible
by the support from our alumni. Students who once sat in the seats that you're sitting in right now. So for those of you who attend LI for at least 1 year and leave on good terms, and those who graduate from LI, remember you will always have a home here at Linden Institute. And that concludes LI's history. So, make sure I get this right. First, let me throw out a few questions and see if anyone has been listening. Can anyone tell me who it was that chose the mascot Vikings? Pop Forrest. Mr. Albert Forrest, who was nicknamed Pop Forrest. Can anyone tell me what emblem was on our first football helmets, or afterwards we were considered the Vikings? Wing. Good. Who wrote our alma mater? Miss Ruffner, are you cheating? Oh, good girl. Okay. Close. He actually was the one who named the cynosure, but Walter True was the one, our headmaster at the time, who wrote the words to the alma mater. How long did it take to rebuild the main building after it burned? A year, a little under a year, 11 months, good. What year was our first publication of the cynosure? Good. Why did we start a teacher training course here at LI? What? Come on, what did you say? Oh, the shortage of teachers in the States? Is that what you said? Good answer. What LI event was held for the 96th time this year? Winter Carnival. What does the mural of the Parthenon symbolize? Yes, the architecture, the columns, it symbolizes the classic roots of Linden Institute. And what else right back here? Okay, here's the trick one. This is for Mr. Heath. Is he in here? So, Mr. Heath, what is the oldest sport here at Linden Institute? So I guess what I'm going to use here is a little keyword. Which is the oldest consecutive sport at Linden Institute? And you're right, it's boys track and field. So baseball actually started prior to it, but remember it had a 52-year hiatus. So just a little tidbit of what is to come. So on Thursday, April 11th, here in Assembly, each class will need to come up with 3 representatives from your class. And they will come up here on stage. We'll have a little trivia. And the class that wins gets an ice cream social and lunch the next day. So,
as the loud trucks go, brag. Easy. Mornings like a joyless glacier creep towards a leap of faith that the snow will go and the track will come back, so that Mr. Heath and Chief can give the young people some grief as they oval their way through a rainy day. Brap. Some sweet mystery will brighten drab finches into flashes of yellow. The rivers, by contrast, will fill with an unfishable churning that will leave Mr. Levine yearning for the calm pools of late May. Brap. Bitter wind, grumbling softball players slide into Sanborn, bats sticking out of their backpacks like nunchucks. Higher up the hill slumbers the diamond in the rough and the dugout that will require digging out before the first pitch flies. Brap. Herds of deer dot the spots on the south-facing slopes in hopes of finding what some other deer didn't. Ravens and crows find those that weren't so fortunate. Brap. The ultimate winds will warm and the discs will cut through the breezy air as players dodge and dart on the gravity parking lot. Brap. March has its tide of Ides and April is the coolest month. So listen to the little goat-footed balloon man in you and get out and into the mud-luscious world that awaits you.
And it's from Kite Fly. So I am going to interview a boy who's flying this kite right there. So, and his name is John Blackie. John, hi. So, do you like these kite flying things? Yeah. What do you like about them? Sometimes it's a little hard doing this. And, do they have instructors here? Yeah. Oh, do you like having instructions of how to do it? Yes. Okay. What's your favorite part about flying kites? I don't know. Whoa, can I hear the wind with this? That I could for a second. Wow. So, can you show us some of your tricks of how to do this? Sure. Okay. So, what are you doing right now? I'm winding. Okay. So, is that one of the things you have to learn? Oh, sometimes you have to jerk it. Okay. And right now it's against the wind. It's good if you go. Okay, and it is zooming up, zooming down. How long have you been kite flying here? Basically just this year. Oh, when did the kite flying field open for this year? The beginning of this month. Oh, okay. Thank you for letting me interview you. Thanks for watching. I'm Elizabeth May.